have done, and very important thing, we are not interested in the cryptocurrency part. We want to develop some other applications using blockchain. So we are considering two things. One is on e-healthcare and another one is decentralized authentication for IoT. In these two areas we are working. So this is what my experience with blockchain, and mostly I don't work on smart contract or even the hyperledger based chain code also. I usually customize the Ethereum implementation, whatever Go Ethereum available. So I customize according to my requirement, I work on it. However, my students are working on the smart contract and the chain code. So this is what we do in our lab with the blockchain as a tool for our applications. So let me start. So before I get into blockchain, I would like to tell you one more thing. Blockchain, even though we see this as the new concept, but it is not new. Actually, in 1991, Scott and Stewart, they have introduced the concept similar to this. And again, 1996, they brought the timestamp. Along with Haber, in 1996, they introduced the timestamp in the concept so that they ensure that nobody can claim that it was done before or later. So during that time, it was not that popular. But when in 2008, this Bitcoin comes, you know that, right? Money plays the major role. When it comes along with Bitcoin, so it becomes more popular. I cannot say that exactly what Stewart and Scott proposed was in the Bitcoin. There was a lot of improvement done by anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto, but it was not completely new, and it was somewhat derived from the previous proposed concepts. And also blockchain we can see as the, like, what we can say, like a framework we can see, but there are so many components involved in it. See, starting from data structure to distributed system, all the components are included. So it is like the combination of various concepts brings the blockchain. So let me get into the discussion. So before I start, I would like to thank or acknowledge all the contributors from whom I have taken the slides as well as various figures. So it is must to acknowledge them. So in the introduction itself, Madam was telling that blockchain is a distributed storage. So there are some who say this is the distributed data structure. Blockchain is a database, distributed data structure, which maintains a continuously growing list of ordered records, which are called as the blocks. This is the definition as per the Wikipedia. And every block is containing the timestamp, the time at which the block was constructed, not the time at which it was approved. So the time it was constructed, and each block is having a link to the previous block. Please try to realize the linked list concept. We will be having so many nodes, and each links are linked, each nodes are linked through the pointers. So there we use pointers as the memory address. It may be integer memory address, or it may be the character memory address. Mostly we go for the integer during our lab exercises. So similarly here there are blocks which are connected. Instead of the memory address, something else come into the picture for making the link. So that one is the cryptographic hash, which is used for making the link. So since it is cryptographically connected, modification of the data is very less possible. Please do note this. It is not that not possible. We say that it is very less possible, provided there are some condition. In case of cryptocurrency related to Bitcoin and Ethereum, they say that 51% of the infrastructure should not be with the attackers. So because you know that, right, 50-50 means anybody can win. So if it is 51%, then it will be biased, and we assume that 51% of infrastructure should not be with the attacker. So then we can say our blockchain is secure. Otherwise, the attacker may modify the blockchain. So next important question comes, we have the distributed database already, and blockchain also we are calling as the distributed database or distributed data structure. Then what is the difference? If we talk about the distribute, yes, any questions please?
Sir,
Okay,
sir,
okay.
please,
No, sir.
sir, please tell the other participant to stop video sharing and also mute their microphone. So please, it will be helpful. Otherwise,
Okay,
we are disturbing.
okay. So please, whatever he said, I hope you all got it. Please mute your mic. So what is the difference between the distributed database and the new concept of blockchain? So in distributed database, what happens is we need to trust the users, whoever is going to participate. But in blockchain, we don't need to trust the users. We need to trust the blockchain. So I hope now I have joined. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, audible, sir.
Oh, when I was disconnected. This is the problem with
Between,
online teaching.
When we were discussing
the
about
first
the
page, sir.
distributed database, the blockchain.
So this part, are you able to see this slide? Blockchain features.
Yes, sir, visible, but
So-
earlier slides are missing, sir.
From the slide number 3 or 3, from slide number 3, it was.
Oh, that is.
The
Oh,
difference,
here itself it was.
This, sir.
Okay. The first part I have explained, or I was in the second part.
Second
So
part.
we were in the regular distributed database plus blockchain.
I'm not getting, madam.
Sir, in the first part, sir, even in the first part, we were not able to hear you, sir.
Oh, now is it audible?
Yes, sir. It is clear, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you. See, you should have said this right before. I was talking, it's like, okay. So, no issues. So, blockchain is a distributed database which contains a growing list of ordered records called blocks. This is like the statement given in the Wikipedia. So there are blocks which are connected with each other, and each block contains the timestamp, and the link made is using the cryptographic hash. So you remember our linked list. In linked list, what happened? We use the nodes, and nodes are connected using the links. The links what we use there is the memory address. It may be integer memory address or the character memory address. But in case of blockchain, instead of memory address, we are going to use the cryptographic hash to connect. Since you know that in cryptographic hash, if any modification, small modification gives the huge impact on the hash output. So since it is connected cryptographically, modification of the data is very less possible. And please do note that I am not saying that it is not possible. I am saying it is very less possible because there is some provision or provided with some infrastructure. In Ethereum and in Bitcoin, they say that 51% of the infrastructure should not be with the attackers to balance. So if let's assume that 51% of the infrastructure is with the genuine users and 49% with the attackers. So the chance of building the next block by the genuine users are more when compared to the attackers. So that's why they say that at least the genuine user should have 51% infrastructure to keep the blocks growing properly. Properly in the sense securely. So the next important question comes, what is the difference between the distributed database, which we already have, and the blockchain? So the important advantage of the blockchain is no need to trust any users in the network. You can allow any users. If you see Bitcoin or Ethereum, anybody can join. So whoever joins the network can participate in all the activities, but they are if they have the sufficient infrastructure, they can perform the attack also. Even though they perform the attack, the network will survive because other users are not all the users are attackers. There are users who are genuine. They can make the network survivable provided that 51% attackers 51% infrastructure is not with the attackers. So the third one, you see, the record keeping and searching is a complex task. So in blockchain, every block contains some data, and let's assume that the chain is keep on growing. This is very important. Please remember this. The block growth should keep on grow. What will happen in case the block growth stops? Then we can announce that the particular application is dead. Okay, if we see in Bitcoin or Ethereum, so in Bitcoin every 10 minutes block has to be generated. In case of Ethereum, around 15 seconds it's take to generate the new block. That is after mining. I will be discussing about that. So it should keep on growing. If whenever it stops, that means we will say the application is dead. The reason is whatever transaction we are going to make, that should be part of the block. If the block is not going to be there, then there won't be any transaction approved. If no transaction is approved, then whatever you have as a data or the coin or the currency, that will be with you only, since you are not making any transaction. If no transaction happens, the application will be dead. So let's assume for the third point, the block is growing. Right now, let's assume we are in the 1000 block and our data was in the second block. If you want to search it, the only option is you have to traverse from 1000th block to second block. So it will be a complex task. But what happens in Ethereum and Hyperledger, they keep the world state, which maintains the latest data in the world state. So instead of traversing, you can fetch from the world state. But sometimes what happens if you want to find out your transaction, what you have made, those things will not be available in the world state. So the only option is you have to traverse completely and reach the second block and access the data. So this is the problem with our blockchain compared to the relational database what we use with MySQL or Oracle. So again, to answer the question, why not just use a shared relational database? These are the questions should be answered, but all these questions will be answered by the blockchain, since every users are the owner, user in the sense those who have sufficient infrastructure and have taking part in the life of the network, that is the growth of the blockchain, will have the data. So they are responsible to maintain the data as well as for the security of the data. In case we use simple shared relational database, these questions will be unanswered. So the features of the blockchain are the public verifiability. Since the blocks are public, even now you can see by opening the Bitcoin.org or Ethereum.org, you can see what transactions are going on. And it has the transparency, but now people are working to overcome, they want to minimize the transparency part with respect to achieving the privacy. So there are protocols like Algorand, they ensures the privacy also, and Monero is there, that is also ensuring the privacy. And next is it provides the integrity, since we are using the cryptography hash. Then redundancy, since everybody is having the copy, so redundancy of the data will be maintained, and it is trusted. But the users are non-trusted, provided that 51% of users are trusted or 51% of infrastructure holders are trusted and remainings are untrusted, non-trusted, then also the network is trusted. So these are the features of the blockchain. So you can see this. This is the sample blockchain structure based on Ethereum. It's not based on the Bitcoin. So you see this is one block and this is another block. And you can see here there is a parent hash given. Parent hash means the parent of this block is this block. The hash of this block will be present in this place. So similarly for the next block, the hash of this will be present in the next block parent hash. So this is the way the link is established between one block to another block. And if you see as the blockchain, every block contains two parts. This is the first one, which is called as the header, and this is the second part, which is called as the data. Now you see the chain will go like this. I hope you are getting, the chain will go like this, and this is the data part. And here they use Merkle tree to store only the root hash in the header, not these all, because the Merkle tree ensures the integrity of the data. So that is the reason they store only the root in the header. So similarly in this place, and you can see one another advantage in this block, we are having the link from here to this. So the reason is, let's assume this is the tree made, Merkle tree made, and when we come to the next block, only on this block some changes are made and these blocks remain same. So in that case, instead of creating new node for the old one, this is the one we have to bring into this place. instead of creating the new one, you can give the pointer to the old one so that it will be like part of this. At the same time, we minimize the usage of the space. So this advantages with the Ethereum implementation. So the blockchain contains blocks, and each block contains two parts. One is the header part and another one is the data part. So here I have shown only one Merkle tree, but there will be multiple Merkle trees based on the implementation. So please do remember, it has two part, header and data. The reason why I am asking you again and again to remember this is, this will be used in future when we talk about the different types of nodes. So the important thing, the hashing. After that you see the Merkle tree. Then we will be talking about the distributed database. So we will go one by one. So the first concept, so this is the brief introduction about the blockchain. Now from now onwards I will be discussing the different components used in the blockchain. The first one is the cryptography hash. I hope you all know that SHA algorithm or MD5 algorithm, HMAC algorithms. These are the message digest hashing algorithms which takes infinite size input and produces the fixed size output. And the cryptography hash should follow some condition which is very important when you want to develop any new algorithm or create a new algorithm. You should consider that three properties should be satisfied. The first one is the pre-image resistance, where you can go, given the function for your input, it produces some hash output. From the hash output, you should not, using the function, the same function or any other function, you should not bring out the message back. So this should be like a one-way function. That is the first requirement. The second requirement is second pre-image resistance. So let's see that here there are two message M1 and M2 which produces the same hash output. So here if you see the third one, collision resistance, so that is also exactly same. So what they want to emphasize here is, provided two different messages should not give same hash output. That is definitely possible, because let's assume the hash output here, the size of this is 3, n equal to 3, and our input is 20, then definitely what will happen, the output space is only 8, but your input space is 20. So definitely there will be a possibility of collision. So here also in all the places collision is possible. When you see the SHA algorithm, which is 256 as the n value, the total space is 2 power 256. That will be the huge value. So if your input goes more than 2 power 256, definitely you are going to get the collision. However, we have to make sure that just like that, if you are choosing two messages, should not produce the same hash output. So what the second pre-image resistance and collision resistance difference is, in second pre-image resistance, M1 is given and H1 is given. You have to find out M2 which will produce H1. So you can see there is a restriction, given M1 and H1 you have to find M2. But in case of collision resistance, you are free. There is nothing given. You can find out any M1 and M2 which will produce the H1. So that is what the collision resistance is. So when we consider any of the cryptography hashing algorithms, we have to ensure that these three properties are followed. And another important thing, definitely collision is possible after certain number of attempts, but that certain number of attempts should be too high. So I hope you people might have gone through this birthday problem. So when we analyze this collision resistance using the birthday problem, let's assume that we are going to use the SHA algorithm with the output sizes 2 power 250, the output sizes n equal to 256. So in that case, the total space of our output is 2 power 256 minus 1. Using the birthday problem, you can prove that in 2 power 256 by 2 number of attempts, you can bring out the collision with 50% probability. So like this, you can claim that the collision is possible, but it is not just like that you take two messages and bring out the collision. So what we do in our lab, it is not introduced by me. Before me, some other faculty was following. We take introduction to programming course. We teach. During the course contains the lab also, lab component. So when we take the lab evaluation, what we do is we ask the student to do the program, and we will give paper to all of them. Once the time of the exam is over, they have to generate the hash value and give it to us, the program hash value, and give it to us. After that, after 2 days, we will open the portal for online evaluation. They have to upload. So once they upload, system will evaluate and provide the output as whether the answer is correct or partially correct, whether it is copied or not. All those things will be done. In case we give sufficient 2 days time for the students to upload, when in case the student try to modify the program, it will be caught using the hash values what we have already collected. So now I hope you got the importance of the hash. So whatever example we are doing, that is only one of the applications of the hashing, but there are so many. So the blockchain uses this as an important property. So the whatever hashing algorithms MD5 and SHA up to SHA-2 version, it uses the Merkle-Damgard construction. This was up to 2015, we can say up to August 2015, this was there. So what the Merkle-Damgard construction does is, it partition the data, input data into multiple blocks, and each block will be given to a function, and output of one block will go to the next block function, and like that it will go. So there is a problem with this. They call that as the length extension attack. Let's say that here I have the output, which is the final output. Now I want to modify whatever input is coming. So what I will do is, the output what I get, which is transmitted in the open channel, I will add my data here, and that will be provided. The same function will be used in this place, and that will produce output. That output I will send to the receiver. So once the receiver takes it, definitely he will evaluate for the input. The input also I have modified, and the hash also I am modified, and it will be accepted at the receiver end. So this problem is with the Merkle-Damgard construction. So the attack name is length extension attack. So the algorithms MD5, SHA-1, SHA-2. SHA-1 contains 256, 512. All those algorithms are vulnerable. So in 2015, considering all this, they have introduced the sponge construction instead of the Merkle-Damgard construction, which is used in the SHA-3 algorithm. So I will let you know why I am talking about this in the blockchain. So you can see this is the sponge construction. You can see this is the input, the block inputs P1, P2, Pn. After that, first they are observing, after that they are squeezing it. So this is the output. So if, let's say here I got the output, if any user want to add his own data, if he is adding here and he sends that output to the receiver, that will not be accepted, because this part is for input and this part is for output. What we are doing as attacker, we will be adding the input in the output part, so it will not be accepted. So this is the advantage of having the sponge construction, which is used in SHA-3 versions of the hashing algorithms. So as of now, whatever we have seen is for the hashing. Okay, since we use here parent hash to link, and here also we use the hash. Second, we'll be talking about the elliptic curve based digital signature algorithm. So now in Bitcoin or Ethereum, what happens? There are users, and users are having the currency with them. When, and you know, there is no physical currency, it is completely digital. When I hold some key, I want to spend it. When I spend, I have to make sure to all others that I am the owner of it and I am the one spending it. So what I have to do, obviously I have to sign on the currency. That is the digital signature I have to do. So for doing the digital signature, we know we will be taking the hash and we will apply some other function. So what is used for this purpose in Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as other implementation is elliptic curve cryptography is used. The reason why elliptic curve cryptography is used, you know that RSA needs more bits. The same level of security will be achieved using elliptic curve with less number of bits. That's why they preferred elliptic curve cryptography to which will be used for signing the transactions. So the transaction contains the transfer of the currency. So the important problem in the sense why the elliptic curve is secure, which has the problem of elliptic curve discrete logarithmic problem. So what it is there are 2 points on the curve. Let's say this is the curve. I choose 2 points on the curve, and the first point is randomly I have chosen. The second point based on the scalar value k, which will be considered as the primary key. So the point multiplication, the multiplication of k with p produces q. So if we know, and this q is the public key. So please you note here, k is the private key, q is the public key, and this p is the parameter for the algorithm. So this is known and this one is known. Provided this, you cannot bring out k. That is what the elliptic curve discrete logarithmic problem is. So q and p are the point on the curve, and k is the scalar value where you do the point multiplication and get q. So based on elliptic curve, the digital signature algorithm is used. So for that, let's assume Alice wants to send a signed message to Bob. Initially, they must agree on the curve parameters. That is what curve we are going to use. That is, for example, here you see this curve is y square equal to x power 3 minus x. So similarly, they use different curves. Elliptic curve Ethereum uses SCC PK256 as the curve used, and this is the base point, and n is the order of the curve. So this is for the example for Alice and Bob communication. But when we come into the Bitcoin or the Ethereum implementation, we download the code to run the Bitcoin application. In the code itself, those things are pre-written. So when user want to communicate or generate their public key and private key based on the parameters already present, they can create it. So once these are shared, the user will generate their private key, which is in this case the k, and it should be between this 1 to n minus 1. The reason is they should not go more than n. What will happen if you are going more than 1, you will get into the point of infinity, which will be kind of null. So we should not go for that, and also I don't want to emphasize more on the elliptic curve here, and the public key will be the curve point, again the same, the private key into the base point, which is p in case of this slide. So using those, the signature will be done. This is the generation of signature. You see, this is the message. So instead of message, we will be having the transaction in our implementation, and then these two will be generated, R and S, and that will be transferred to the receiver. Receiver in the sense, here all are the receivers. It will be broadcasted in case of blockchain implementation. So everyone will take this RS and they will perform some reverse operation. So along with RS, M will also be provided. So you know about this message authentication, what they do, and for digital signature. So that will be provided. Based on that, the receiver will verify whether the message sent is by the right owner or not. And one advantage elliptic curve has, usually when I make a transaction and I do sign, what I do, I use my private key to sign the document, and you all will be using my public key to verify the document. So in this case, you need the public key of mine. But elliptic curve has one advantage from the signature. Signature is here R and S. From R and S, you can derive my public key. So no need of keeping my public key with you. From this itself, you can derive my public key. And one more thing, the Ethereum or Bitcoin, it is huge network. There are massive number of users. So I cannot share my public key with everyone. But we can claim, why not we put that as one of the parameter in the blockchain itself, in the block or the Merkle tree what we maintain. But there is no answer for that. But what they say is we can derive the public key from the signature and we can validate whether it is sent by the right user or not. So this is the verification algorithm which will be used, and it is not required to go in more detail. You can find this from Wikipedia also. So now I hope you got what is the reason of going for hashing and then the elliptic curve. That is the digital signature. Next is the memory hard function. So what memory, first let me complete what is memory hard function, then I will let you know the reason. So you can see the statement, memory bound refers to a situation in which the time to complete a given computational problem is decided primarily by the amount of memory required to hold data. So please see this, when we measure the complexity, we always go and measure with respect to time, computational time. But here what they are saying is you consider the amount of memory required. So let's see this condition. We have a function which we call that as the memory hard function. We have the function as f that needs time t and space s for ordinary computation. Okay, there is a function f which needs some time t and space s for the computation. Now what we are going to do is we are going to reduce this space. So once I reduce this space, that is the s prime, which is lesser than s. If I reduce the space and I perform the same memory hard function f, then what will happen is the time whatever was required previously t, now it will be more, that is t prime, which will be greater than t. I hope you got it. So what it says is, if you have a function with some space and you are doing the computation and you need some time t to compute it. In case you reduce the space, then what will happen is, am I connected? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
So if I reduce the space, what will happen? The time to execute the same function will be too high. That is what the memory hard function says. So this is also used in our email spam also previously. Right now the email service providers are making the system intelligent, so it automatically identifies and segregates as the spam email. So now the question is why this is important. So I will go to the mining little later, but right now it may not be right to ask you. There is a concept called mining in blockchain. Okay, what it does is, there is a problem given, we have to solve it. Okay, the problem we call it as the puzzle. That puzzle is very complex puzzle that we have to solve it. That is what the mining means. But they do it in different manner. So if we have to solve the puzzle, then what we do automatically, we will increase our computational power. We will go for GPU. Along with CPU, you will go for GPU so that you can do the operation very fast, because it is the competition. Everybody will be trying to solve the puzzle separately, and those who have the more computation power can solve the puzzle more quickly because they will be trying more number of attempts. So in that case, let's assume somebody is only increasing their computational processing capacity. That means they increase the GPU. Okay, and in Ethereum they call that as the ASIC devices. Okay, so what those devices does is, no need to buy separate computer for increasing the processing power. You just buy the ASIC device which will give the additional computation power and connect with your computer. So then what happens, you have some computation power, that is 10 process per second with your computer. By adding this ASIC device, what will happen? You will be getting 20. Then by adding another ASIC device, you will be getting 30 per second. 30 process you can do per second. But what this memory hard function says, even though you are increasing your computation power and your space remains same, or it is getting lower since you are expanding your processing, and memory remains same, then the time what you are expecting should not be achieved, the time should be more. That is what their plan is. So in brief, if you want to solve the puzzle in very short time, it is not that only you can increase the processing capacity, you should increase the memory capacity also. So when you have to increase both, definitely what you have to do is you have to spend sufficient infrastructure. So that is what the Ethereum want to say. Using the ASIC devices, you cannot increase the processing capacity to solve the mining puzzle. So I hope you got it. What is the need of memory hard function? The memory hard function is not used in Bitcoin, it is used in Ethereum only. And next thing, Merkle tree. You can see here, we use the Merkle tree. Okay, so what is the Merkle tree? This is also the existing concept which is developed by Ralph Merkle. I think in 1971 it was introduced. So that concept is also used. Right now you see the first one is cryptography, which in which both hashing and digital signature is used. Next, memory hard function is used. And now we are going for the Merkle tree. So this is another data structure, and they call this Merkle tree as the hash tree also. Let's say that these are the data which we want to keep. So instead of data in our application, that is the blockchain cryptocurrency implementation, these are the transactions. The transactions are the one which contains the sender and the receiver address and the amount they want to transfer. Again, the internal details of the transaction will differ from one implementation to another implementation. So these are the transactions. So at the leaf of the tree, what it going to have is the hash of this transaction will be stored here, and the hash of the transaction will be in the leaf. Now the left child and right child will be concatenated and given to the hash function, and that will be here. So similarly in this place. So again in this level, these two hashes will be concatenated and given to the hash function. It produces another hash output. Similarly for this. So finally these two will be given as the input to this hash function, and the output is the root. So now what happens in this picture? The root, whatever we have seen there, that will be placed here. Okay. So in case any modification is going to happen here, definitely that will impact in any of this place, and that impact will be here, and here it will have the impact, and finally here also it will have the impact. So already blockchain contains the root, and the new root what you are computing or we are computing will differ from that root. In that case there will be conflict. So from the conflict it will be identified, yes, there is a modification. Okay, once the modification will be identified, that will be thrown out. That user block will be thrown out. So another user block will be considered. So this is the way they ensure the integrity for the data part. So you see this, the Merkle tree store the transaction details, account balances also maintained. In case of Ethereum, the world state, what I said, that is maintained through the Merkle tree, but they use some additional concept, which is the Patricia Merkle tree they use. So I hope you got what is the use of Merkle tree in blockchain. Next is the Bloom filter, which you already taught and you have studied during your data structures and algorithm course. So you know that Bloom filter, if you want to put some data into some of the storage, you will take multiple hashing algorithms and you compute the hash, and you will be having the bit array there will be a bit array and there will be 3 hash algorithms. You will compute the hash, and whatever output it produces in that storage, you will be set as 1. You will set for that particular data as 1. So similarly for all inputs. Later, if you want to search, again you will perform the same operation. See, this is only the bit array, the actual database is here. Let's assume actual database is here. When you are going to search in the actual database, it will be a complex task. So that is the reason, before going to search in this huge database, what user will do is, first the key is known, the input key. The input key will be given to different hash functions, and that output place will be verified in the bit array. If they see that in all 3 places, if the bit array is set to 1, then they know that the data is available in this place, then they can go and search it. But it is not 100% guaranteed that data will be there. The reason is the Bloom filter has the false positive. But you can adjust the false positive based on your equation. That equation includes the size of this array and the number of hash algorithms you are going to use. But it does not have any false negative, because if the data not present in the huge storage, definitely any one of this will be set into 0. No, I think I have said something in reverse. So if data is present, definitely it will say the data is present. But what happens in false positive, the data may not present, but it gives us present, since this size is of limited and maybe more than 1 or 2 content or the data will have the same storage. In that case, the bits will be set. When we are going to access it, it will say data is available. When you go to find, actually you will find that data is not there. So, and it will not be always the case that here it says yes and here it will be no. It is not like that. The chance is very less. So accordingly, you have to build this bit array. So now, what is the use of the Bloom filter in blockchain? So again, I go back. Sorry for moving here and there. Let's assume this is the tree which holds all the transaction. Okay. Now I have to find out whether particular transaction is part of this tree or not. So I have to traverse the complete tree, and then I have to find out whether it is part of it or not. Instead of traversing the complete chain, I will be having the Bloom filter here. So using the Bloom filter, I will verify whether the particular transaction is part of this tree or not. If it is part, then I will do the traverse, otherwise I will move to the next block. The reason is, as I said in the beginning, now we are in the 1000th block, and maybe our transaction is in the 2nd block. So it is not good to traverse each and every block tree and find out whether the transaction is present or not. Instead of that, you use the Bloom filter and see whether it is part of it or not. If it is part of it, traverse, otherwise you move to the next block. So this facility is available in Ethereum, not in Bitcoin. So that is the reason they use the Bloom filter. So I hope it is clear. Next is the distributed system. In the previous slide, in the beginning of the slide itself, it comes as this is the distributed database. So in the distributed database, we keep the things in multiple machines or the networked computers, and they all will coordinate and do the process. So the same thing happens in the blockchain. It is distributed. There are n number of users and they do the process and come to the conclusion. Now the important question is the conclusion. How they will achieve the common goal? If there are n number of users, so how can they ensure the common goal? So that is where the consensus comes. The consensus protocols. Again, this is not the new one. This is also the existing, but the way the consensus used in Bitcoin and Ethereum is somewhat new. So why this achieving common goal is complex? Let's see an example, which is the Byzantine generals problem. I think very less time is there. I have to move little fast. So don't consider this figure 2. Let's consider the figure 1 first. There is a commander and there are two lieutenants connected. Okay, and they have decided to go for a war against a particular, I cannot say a country, some location. Okay, so the commander will inform both of them that yes, you have to go for the attack. Otherwise, they will not go for the attack. You know that in defense, the commander is having the complete power and all others will follow. Now let's assume the commander gives the command to both of the lieutenants, go for the attack, and both will go for the attack. And very important thing, if both go together, they will win the battle. Otherwise, they will lose the battle. Now let's assume this lieutenant 2 is compromised through some way. Commander says, for both of them, you go for attack, you go for attack. Now what happens left, and they exchange the message also. Lieutenant 1 sends message attack as the one received from commander to lieutenant 2. So lieutenant 1 sends, he said attack. But in case of lieutenant 2, he says commander asked me to retreat. So then what will happen? The lieutenant 2, we don't bother about lieutenant 2 because he is the compromised. Let's consider the lieutenant 1. So there are total 3 users. Okay, lieutenant 1 having one message for attack and one message for retreat. So here there is no majority. He cannot take any decision, as well as he does not know who is the attacker, who is the one compromised, whether commander is compromised or lieutenant 2 is compromised. Because if you see the second picture, it will be more clear. So again the same scenario, here we can assume that commander is compromised. So commander here gives attack as the message, here he sends retreat as the message. And both of them are genuine. What lieutenant 1 will say to lieutenant 2 is attack, lieutenant 2 will send lieutenant 1 as retreat. So in this case what happened? Attack, lieutenant 1 will have two message, one as attack and one as retreat. Lieutenant 2 will have one message as retreat and one message as attack. So if you see, lieutenant 1 cannot find out who is the attacker. The second, he cannot take any decision. The reason is he has one message as attack and one message as retreat. So he cannot, if there is any majority, then he can go for it. If there is no majority, then he cannot do anything. So this is the problem when we are going for the distributed system. So this problem, they call it as the Byzantine generals problem. The solution is, let's add one more user here. And let's say that lieutenant 2 is compromised in this example. So lieutenant 1 and lieutenant 3 will share the message. So in the final, what happened? Lieutenant 3 will be having two messages attack, one message as retreat. Similarly, lieutenant will have two messages attack and one message as retreat. So now you see there is a majority on the attack, they will go for it. So like this, the problem can be solved. So that is what, based on the majority. So they call those type of protocols as the Byzantine fault tolerance. You have the network of size n, which should be greater than 3t. What is this t means? Number of fault nodes you are going to survive on the network. In this case, so here 1, 2 and 3. Now here the third person is the malicious, that is the t. So this will not work because your size should be greater than 3t. That is, here we are having 3 and one attacker, and the condition is greater than 3t. So if we add one more user in this place, then what will happen? You will be having 4 machine which is greater than 3t plus 1, and this attacker is number of attacker, the t is 1, so it will be 4 users that we will be having in our network. And if you have more attackers, accordingly the network size should grow. So similarly, there are other algorithms also available for the Byzantine fault tolerance. Just a second, please. Sorry. So the next important, so this one is solvable. This particular Byzantine generals problem is solvable using the Byzantine fault tolerance and some other protocols also. But you see here, this is another problem which is called as the two generals problem. So till now there is no solution available in our computational theory to solve this. It is like there are two army units placed on both the side of the enemy area, and they agreed on going for the attack, but the time is not agreed upon. So when the time is not agreed upon, they cannot go for the battle. So what happens, let's assume that army 1 and the commander here decides the time and he sends to A2, and the only option to communicate is through the enemy area. Don't consider that we have this wireless connection and all. Okay, so they A1 has to send the message to A2 through this path only, that is through enemy area. So A1 sends the message that we will go for the attack on so and so time. After sending the message, A1 cannot go for the battle. The reason is he is not sure whether A2 has received the message or not. So the only option for this is A2 will send the acknowledgement. Once the A2 has sent the acknowledgement, both of them should not go for the attack. The reason is A2 is not aware whether the acknowledgement is received by A1 or not. So then how the problem will be solved? A1 can send the acknowledgement. When A1 send the acknowledgement, again A1 cannot go for the war since A1 is not aware whether the acknowledgement is received by A2 or not. So this will be keep on going. So we don't have the solution for this. So why this problem comes into the blockchain is, I mine a block and I broadcast to the network. What is the guarantee that my block is received by all the nodes? So if my blocks are not received by all the users, and there is a possibility that will not be part of the main chain. So I will talk about that little later, that main chain and all. So if it is not part of the main chain, I cannot act on my transaction. Okay, so that is the issue in the blockchain, and we don't have any solution. The solution for this problem, what they say is, when you make a transaction, don't act on the transaction immediately. You have to wait for next some number of blocks. For example, in Ethereum, they say wait for next 7 blocks. If your transaction containing block is part of the main chain, then you act, otherwise don't act. Similarly, in Ethereum, they say after 23 blocks only you have to make the you have to work on the particular transaction or act on the transaction. So in this way they are solving this problem. Otherwise there is no solution to this. In networks we have, I hope you all know, the TCP protocol has the SYN connection establishment, which is sending the SYN acknowledgement and acknowledgement. So there they claim that this problem is solved, but when we see the closing of connection, that is FIN, then FIN acknowledgement and acknowledgement goes. There again this problem exists. They assume based on the time they are solving the problem. But here the assumption is there is no synchronous environment. The environment is asynchronous. So I hope you understand what is the need of the distributed system and consensus required for the blockchain. So there are 2 types of consensus protocol. One is accurate, which we can say based on the Byzantine fault tolerance, and another one is probabilistic, which uses the proof of work, proof of stake and other things. So now what is this accurate and what is the probabilistic? In case of accurate, if a block is mined, let's assume a block is mined, then definitely we can say that block will be part of the main chain. But in case of probabilistic, we cannot say a block mined will be part of the main chain. It will not be part of the main chain. That is the difference between the accurate and the probabilistic protocol. If we see in Hyperledger, if some block is mined, then definitely that will be part of the main chain, which uses the Byzantine based consensus protocol. But in Ethereum and Bitcoin, there is no guarantee that a mined block will be part of the main chain. So next is the participants. So who are the participants? So as I said, anybody can take participation in the blockchain network, and we categorize the users into two. One is the light node and another one is the full node. You see here that node which stores only header. I asked you to remember during when I was explaining the introduction slide, there are header and the data part. The node which stores only header, that is called as the light node. The node which stores both header as well as data, that is called as the full node, which will also do mining, that is solving the puzzle. And I introduced the third node, which is the client node, who doesn't store the header or does not store the data and the header part, and not even take mining also, but it will have the account in the network. For example, in Bitcoin, there are many users having the account, but they don't store or they don't take participation in mining. So those nodes I call as the client node, and remaining nodes as the light node and full node. So if any user want to participate as either light node, full node or client node, they need some address to join the network. So how the address will be generated? In case of Ethereum, first let me go to Bitcoin and then come to Ethereum. So here you see there is a public key. So from where this public key comes? The public key comes from the elliptic curve, what we have already discussed. From there, that public key will be given to the SHA-256, and that output will be given again to RIP EMD hash function. Then certain procedure is followed to bring out the address. Okay, and in Bitcoin they say for every transaction you use different address to overcome various issues. You can see one hash function and two hash function. So they are using two hashes. In Satoshi Nakamoto introduction, there are two hashes given. Now you see in case of Ethereum, the same public key is used here, that is given to the hash function as the input, like public key, and here it is given to the SHA-256 and the output comes. Once the output comes, it is of 32 bytes, that is 256 bits, 32 bytes. So drop the first 12 bytes and take the remaining 20 bytes as the address. So similarly in Bitcoin also some procedure followed. So you will be having 32 bytes hash output. Out of the 12 bytes you are, first 12 bytes you are dropping, remaining 20 bytes are the address of the user. The address is, we can say, the pseudo anonymous address. It's not completely anonymous, it is pseudo anonymous address. So the reason is for dropping 12 bytes, the first 12 bytes. If you see the hash output with the different combinations of input, you can see the first 12 bytes, the chance of having this common value will be more. That is the reason they take last 20 bytes. And you see here it uses only one hash, but in case of here it uses two hash. The reason Bitcoin uses the Merkle-Damgard construction based hashing algorithm, which was used, the reason is the Bitcoin was introduced in 2008. During that time, SHA-3 was not introduced. So to overcome if any attack based on length extension, we need to go for multiple hashing. So they have added two hashes. And again, for this, there is no, whatever justification I have given, there is no nowhere written in the paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, but it is written somewhere in the Stack Exchange. From there I got this input, but there is no theoretical proof for this. But the Ethereum has come after SHA-3, so they have used the SHA-3 function, which uses the sponge construction. No need to go for multiple hashes, since sponge construction overcomes the length extension attack, so they use only one hash. But the drawback with Ethereum is, here you will be having only one address for your complete period. If you have an account, and you should have the same account address for the complete lifetime of your account running on the application. So is there any doubt?
No, sir.
Okay. So next is the mining, what I was telling in the beginning, that what is the mining. So mining is solving the puzzle. Okay, the puzzle I will come in the next slide. So what the miner has to do, the job of the miner is he has to make a block, and for making the block he has to receive the transaction. So what happens is, let's say there are n number of miners available, and there will be n number of miners as well as other users making the transaction. So once they make the transaction, they broadcast to the network. So all the transaction will be broadcasted. What the miners infrastructure has is, they have a pool. They call that as the transaction pool. Whatever the transaction comes, those transaction will be put into the pool. So like every user in the network will have the same set of transaction, but there will be a little delay since the net it has to traverse from one to another. So what the miner will do, miner will fetch some of the transaction from the transaction pool. How they will fetch is, they will see which transaction is giving more reward. Reward in the sense transaction fee. If somebody gives more transaction fee, then those transaction will be picked in the first, at the first priority. So like that they will pick the transaction and they will validate whether the transaction is correct or not. So validation means whether both the sender and recipients available and the sender is having sufficient amount in his account or not. These all will be validated. If it will be validated, so if all will be validated, the tree will be formed like this. Once the tree will be formed, they will find the timestamp and then block size, block hash, everything will be found, and it is made like this. So the block will be made. So after that, once the block that is not the complete block, that is the partial block. After completing that, they will go for mining. So now it is like solving the puzzle. So they have to take some input as the parameter and they have to solve the puzzle. That puzzle I will come in the next slide. I will come to that in the next slide. So once the puzzle is solved, then now we can say the block is completely formed. And the puzzle is solved, right? The requirement here is important requirement in puzzle solving. While solving the puzzle, you have to make number of attempts, massive number of attempts, but to verify the puzzle, that whether you have solved or not, that should be done in the single attempt. That is what the requirement is. So the verification information should be added into the block. So once you have mined the block, now you are eligible for the reward. So in Bitcoin as well as in Ethereum, since you are spending so much of infrastructure to solve the puzzle, you will get the reward. So the reward will be, the reward is like, you know, in real time scenario, we have the Reserve Bank of India which prints the currency. In case of the cryptocurrency, once you mine the block, you are like the Reserve Bank, you will add certain amount which is based on the protocol on your account. That will be like a new transaction which they call as the coin based transaction. This is the way the new coins are introduced in the blockchain. And also you will be getting the transaction, the miner will be getting the transaction fee for making, for taking those transaction and committing into the block. So after doing this, this will be broadcasted to the network. The receiver, the other receiver will receive it and they will see whether the block is the block is mined properly or not, that by solving the verifying the puzzle as well as validating all the transaction. If it is validated successfully, then the receivers will add that block into the chain and they will work for the next block. So here you see there is a term called uncle or stale block. You see this. The very first block of any of the blockchain will be called as the Genesis block, that will be given by the Bootstrap node, that is the developer. So now after that some miner has mined the block number 1. After that you can see there are 2 blocks for block number 2. There are 2 miners mined it. Okay, this block is mined by miner 1 and this block is mined by miner 2. Now out of these 2 blocks only 1 block is going to win the race. So you remember I was talking about the main chain. Main chain means the chain which contains the longest length, that will be considered as the main chain. So out of these 2 blocks, this particular block is broadcasted on one side. Finally it will reach everyone, but you know that, right? When we broadcast, let's say the 2 users on the 2 extreme end, one user will broadcast, so it will go to his neighbor immediately. Similarly for the other user, it will go to his neighbor very quickly. So these 2 blocks will be reached to their neighbors, that miner neighbors, and they will be started working on block 3. So when they will be working on started block 3, and again let's assume that there are 3 blocks generated for block 3. One is based on block 2, this block, and another 2 block 3s are based on this block 2. So now these 2 block miners will send to their neighbors. Ultimately it has to reach all, but first it goes to their neighbors. And similarly this block 3 user will send to his or her neighbors. So then what happens? The block 4 is also created. Here also block 4 is created. When the block 4 is created, it is identified that this particular blocks are reached only minimal number of users in the network, and this is reached the maximum number of the users in the network. So what will happen? These blocks, even though these are connected, this will go as the uncle block, or they call it a stale block or Wormer's block in Ethereum. So these blocks are existing in the chain, but there is no use, but it provides security in case of Ethereum. So then you see the block 4, there are 2 blocks generated for 4, but this has won the race because this block is reached maximum number of users, and then block 5, block 6, block 7. So you can see the chain like this. So whatever blocks are not part of the main chain, those blocks are called as the uncle blocks or the stale blocks. So for example, in this case, block 2 miner also get the reward, and this block miner also get the reward. But this particular miner will get finally the reward, and this miner will not get the reward. So what happens is, even though he solved the puzzle, he won't get the reward as well as no transaction fee for him. So then what happens? This discourages the user. So that is miner. So that is the reason in Ethereum they have introduced the concept, if more than one user mines the block, the main chain miner will get as usual that mining reward. The other miners will get the percentage of total reward, so that they will also be encouraged, and that will improve the security of the blockchain application. So we can say this as the forks also. So you can see this, here one chain is going on and here another chain is going on. So now what is the puzzle? So that is what the proof of work comes into the picture. So this also controls the rate at which blocks can be generated. So what the puzzle is, now I have a function, let's say again that is the hash function, which produces the output of 256 bits. So the possible output is 2 power 256. And what I will ask you is, you have the block which contains some information, take that as the input. Along with that, there is another one attribute you can add, that is called as the nonce. So the concatenation of the block required information and the nonce. Later the nonce will also be part of the block to validate the puzzle. So the primary block information concatenated with nonce, you give it to the hash function, let it produce one output, but that output should be less than this. Okay, let's say 2 power 256 is the maximum value. I put the condition the hash output should be less than 2 power 10 or 2 power 210. So in that case, what happens? You will be giving one input and check the output whether it is less than or not. If it is not less than, then you will be changing the nonce. So you will be keep on changing the nonce. At one point of time, you will find that the value is less than the threshold, whatever we are asking. So then it will be considered as the puzzle is solved. So the primary blockchain plus the nonce will be used to validate whether the puzzle is solved or not. So what happens? You have the block information. Along with the block information, the nonce will also be added as a block attribute. So that will be broadcasted. If any user want to verify whether the successful mining is done or not, so they will take the primary block information, they will concatenate the nonce, they will hash it, the output will be verified whether it is less than this or not. So now the next question comes, what is this HD? The maximum size is 2 power 256. The space of the hash value is 0 to 2 power 256 minus 1. But they put the threshold, as I said, I want up to 2 power 254. So how they will decide? Okay, that is based on the difficulty. So in Bitcoin, what happens? Initially, there was a target fixed, that is around 2 power 224. So this is the truncated maximum target they have fixed. Based on the target, the difficulty is computed. So let me go to this first. So in Bitcoin, what happens? For every 2 weeks, the difficulty will be changed. So the difficulty in the sense, this will be changed. And they want every block should be mined in 10 minutes of time. So you know that in 2 weeks, how many blocks will be generated considering 10 minutes? That is the expected time. That is the expected number of blocks to be generated in that time. And there may be possibility that while solving the puzzle in very early attempt, we get the we successfully solve the puzzle. So that will be the actual time. So these two will be computed as this computation, the division computation will be computed and taken as the deviation. So that deviation will be multiplied with the old difficulty. The old difficulty is computed based on the maximum target and the current target. So in case of the very beginning, the maximum target will be the current target. So the difficulty will be computed and then that difficulty will be used to fix the current target. So now you see, this is the, let's assume this as the maximum target, 2 power 256 as the maximum target, and the difficulty is the one which is computed, that is the current target, that is this part, and this one, n is the one, sorry, this is the 2 power 256 is the maximum target and this is the difficulty. From this you are computing this current target. So this current target says the mining puzzle what you are going to solve, that should be less than this current target, then only it will be considered as successful. So this is for Bitcoin. Similarly for Ethereum, but there is one difference with Ethereum. In Ethereum, for every block the difficulty will be changed. As I said, in Bitcoin, for every 2 weeks, they call that as the epoch. For every 2 weeks, the difficulty will be changed. But in case of Ethereum, for every block, the difficulty will be changed. So you can see there are 2 different difficulty computation. This was the earlier version. Now it is not used. The reason is the difference of the timestamp will always bound on to some value which is 13. In case even it is more also they are not considering. I don't want to get into this in more detail since we don't have time. Maybe we can discuss offline if you want more on this. So this is the revised blockchain difficulty, the block difficulty for Ethereum, and you can see this part. This is very important. When this will be enabled, then the time for mining the block will be too high because the target will be reduced a lot. So why they have introduced this concept is, see, this is applicable when the number of blocks are more than this. In case they want to make, the developers want to make change in the Ethereum implementation, during this time they can make. The reason is the mining time will expand. During that time they can make the modification in the real-time implementation. That is the reason they have introduced this. They call this as the difficulty bomb, this particular portion of the equation. So I was telling that based on the difficulty, the puzzle will be solved and the hardness of the puzzle will be more. So I tried on my machine, which is the normal desktop with the 3.2 gigahertz processor. I fixed the target as 2 power 250. And I have taken ABCD as the input and concatenated with some other value. So what I have seen is this was implemented using the Go language. When the target is 2 power 250 in 1033 attempts in these many seconds, that is in these many seconds I found the output. But when I put the target as 2 power 210, it was running for 3 days. I could not find the answer. Now you can see when the target reduces, what will be the complexity of the solving puzzle. So if this is the case, then everybody has to invest huge and they have to use the computational power completely. If the computation power is used, and you know what will happen, the consumption of electricity. So again, this will harm the environment. So that is the reason they have introduced the proof of stake concept. In the proof of stake is also similar to proof of work, where the puzzle has to be solved. Only one difference: in proof of work, any miner can try to solve the puzzle. In proof of stake, they restrict the miners based on the balance they are having. And next is the proof of burn. This is something not for solving the puzzle. If you want to change one coin from another coin, then you can use the proof of burn. And when proof of elapsed time, this is introduced in the Intel processor. Here you have to solve the puzzle, but there is no complexity. Your processor itself will restrict you to mine the block very consecutively. Once you mine the block, you have to spend some time. After that only you can mine the next block. So through this way, they minimize the computation, thus reduces the energy consumption. So the way of processing, now I am comparing the Bitcoin and Ethereum. In Bitcoin, it works based on the UTXO, that is unspent transaction output. So here they don't maintain any balance. So they maintain only the transaction, and based on the transaction, the money has to be spent. In case of account balance, they maintain the balance, the amount will be reduced. So the amount, the transaction will be based on what balance we have from in the global ledger. So the global ledger is the world state. So you can see this as the Bitcoin transaction. See, there is a transaction. After that, second transaction is made, third transaction is made, fourth transaction is made. You can see this based on this transaction, the second transaction is created. And again, based on the second transaction, third transaction is created and fourth transaction is created. See here, nowhere the transaction is based on the balance. It's based on the transaction. If I send you some money as a transaction, you will keep that as the transaction. When you want to spend that money, then you will be using that transaction as the base and you will be making another transaction. So that is the way the Bitcoin transaction works. So this is the transaction structure which has the input counter. You can have so many input and you can have so many output counter also. And there is one more thing. If I send you, let's say 10 Bitcoin, if you want to make that as the two different, that is if you want to change it, that means if you want to make as a 5 Bitcoins, the only option you have is you have to make a transaction again. In that transaction, input will be the my transaction what I have sent to you as 10 transaction. Output transaction, you can have two counters, one with 5 and another one with 5. The receiver will be obviously you. And you see there is a concept of lock time. This gives advantage to the users. If you have Bitcoin and if you don't want to spend that for some period of time, so you can lock it and keep it, similar to what we have in our savings bank account. That fixed deposit we have, similarly we can have in this also. And it contains some other information, maybe this will be discussed in the next lecture, it may be covered. So as I already said, there is a transaction which is used for the reward. So that transaction will be called as the coin-based transaction. You see here, this transaction has the base transaction as this, and this transaction has the base transaction as this. But for this transaction, if you see, there is no base transaction. So this is like a coin-based transaction where you are creating the new coin. So what will be its base? The base will be some random value given. So in case of Ethereum, if you see the Genesis block, as we have seen, all the blocks will be having the hash of the previous block. The the first block, that is the Genesis block, that does not have any previous block. So the hash, the parent hash of that is the output, the hash output of this particular input. So similarly, there will be some random input given to the hash function, and that will be used as the base transaction for the coin-based transaction. And again, this is on Bitcoin only. This is not with Ethereum. They have the transaction age. Sometimes what happens, a user makes the transaction without giving any transaction fee. As you know that, right? If there is no transaction fee, no miner will take the transaction. So if no miner takes, then the transaction will be pending for very long. To overcome this issue, they have introduced the concept of transaction age, where for every transaction the age will be seen. If the age is too high, whether the particular transaction gives the reward or not, the miner should pick those transactions and add it into the block. That is very important. So in any block, there are few transactions you have to take, which is the aged transaction, that is mandatory. So what happens, even though the users who is having very less coin in their account and not giving the transaction will be part of the blocks, since this advantage is given in the Bitcoin. And this one is on Ethereum. Let's assume miner will work on the transaction, and let me do a transaction which has the infinite loop in the transaction. So normally in transaction you cannot give infinite loop. When you write the smart contract, you can put the infinite loop. So if I put the infinite loop, and there are, let's assume n number of miners, and I am the n plus 1th miner, all n miners are going to work on my transaction which is having infinite loop. So when there is infinite loop, all the miners will be keep on validating the transaction. It will never end. So what I will do is, I will not take the transaction because I know that transaction contains infinite loop which is used for attack purpose. I will take other transaction and I will first mine the block, and I will mine the next block also. So I will get more priority in mining the block. So that's why they have introduced the concept of gas limit. When you make a transaction, you have to say how much gas you want to spend for the transaction. That is, for every operation, some gas will be reduced. So if you are giving infinite loop and your gas is limited, then after those gas expiry, the once the gas is over, no operation will be done on the infinite loop. So automatically all miners will come out. So this is the advantage of gas limit provided in the Ethereum. And for the gas, whatever you spend for your transaction, accordingly your ether will be deducted. That is, the coin will be deducted from your account. So this is one of the advantages given in Ethereum, not in Bitcoin. And there are different attacks possible. The first one is the Sybil attack. Single node can come with multiple identities and try to solve the proof of work. As I said already, they have to solve the huge, massive puzzle. It's not so easy to segregate into multiple identities and do it. They are not going to win anything. So that is the reason they will not go for the Sybil attack. And there is a possibility of double spending. The double spending is possible when we go for this case. Let's assume the block 2 contains my transaction and this block 2 does not contain, let's assume this block contains my transaction, this does not contain my transaction, and this is the part of the main chain. So what happens, let's say that once my transaction take part of this particular block, I will send the I will inform the receiver, I made a transaction to you, you send me the product. Once they send me the product, sir, I'm in lecture, sir. I will talk to you later, sir. Manjari. So what I do is, I will inform my recipient that I made a transaction. Please give me the respective product. So then what will happen? The recipient will give me the product. Once he give me the product, then the chain is growing. In this place, what happens? This particular block is not part of the transaction. Once this chain becomes the main chain, the transaction whatever I have made is of null and void, but I have received the product from the recipient. So who will be affected? The affected person is the recipient, and I can spend this coin again for another transaction. So this can be overcome in the blockchain. That is, this problem is similar to what we have discussed in the two generals problem. So this can be overcome by giving the waiting time. So let's say in this block 2 my transaction is confirmed but not here. What the recipient has to do till the next 7 blocks build on this. Block 3, block 4, block 5, block 6, block 7 up to block 8. Up to that time the recipient should not act on the transaction which is available on this. Then what will happen automatically, when here the recipient is waiting for block 5, the block 5 has not come, so he will come to know that transaction is not having any value, so he will not give the product. So that's why they introduce the concept of waiting. And as I said that in case of Bitcoin 7 blocks you have to wait, and in case of Ethereum 23 blocks you have to wait. For both the things there is no mathematical proof, but it is based on experience they have given this. Based on the experience, in the sense based on the practical experience till now what is going on in the blockchain, they have seen that there is no what to say in the 7th block they can see the first block will be part of the main chain or not, that will be decided. So that is what they have realized, and accordingly they put that condition. So in this way double spending can be minimized. And next is the Eclipse attack. This is very important attack, and you know in peer-to-peer network we say it is like one person is connected with another person directly. That is not possible. You have to connect it with the intermediate users. Let's say Alice is the machine connected with 3 other machines. From that 3 machines the rest of the machines are connected. So what the machines connected with the Alice will do, they will form the Eclipse. they will all will be compromised. They will collude each other. They will completely cover alleys. Whatever transaction made by alleys to the blockchain network, they will not forward that. Similarly, whatever coming from the complete chain, they will not give it to alleys. So they cover the alleys completely with an Eclipse attack, and they will achieve whatever they want to get from the alleys. So how this is overcome in Bitcoin as well as Ethereum is, when you decide on your neighbor, don't decide based on the request comes from the neighbor. You also send some request. And in Ethereum, what it says is your neighbor should always, at least 3 neighbors of your machine should be the bootstrap nodes, that is the developer. So through this, the Eclipse attack can be avoided. So like this, there are so many attacks possible in the blockchain, but people are still keep on working to solve those things. So the applications of blockchain, the first one is Bitcoin or all the cryptocurrency. The second, what we are doing is for the authentication purpose. And there is a concept of Namecoin. You all know about the DNS, that is the domain name system. So the DNS they want to implement using the Namecoin and the medical record management system. And you know, in Andhra Pradesh, they have implemented this land record management system using blockchain. So like this, there are so many applications we can work on with blockchain, even the supply chain management. And you can see massive number of applications, including machine learning. In machine learning, I hope you know the federated learning. There will be distributed users, they will give the features, and there will be one person who will take all the features and analyze. So instead of that centralized party, they say that we will be going for the decentralized using the blockchain. So, okay, I will conclude later. And in blockchain 1.0, the versions, the blockchain 1.0 means the Bitcoin, which does not have the smart contract facility or a decentralized application building facility. Later, the blockchain 2.0, where the Ethereum comes, it allows for building the decentralized application through the smart contract also. Later, the blockchain 3.0 comes, where it does not talk about the proof of work, where it brings the permissioned blockchain, which I will be discussing in the next slide. So the smart contract is something these days everybody uses the smart contract of the blockchain to build their application. It is something like a digital contract signed between 2 or n number of users, when that particular things will be come into the condition, whatever the condition they sign. Once the condition will be satisfied, some operation will be triggered, and that trigger will be maintained in the blockchain, so that nobody can later say that I have not done this or this should have been done. So all this legal problem will be solved using the smart contract. So as a whole, blockchain is the distributed database or the distributed data structure which brings the decentralized concept and ensures the integrity and brings multiple applications to build on it to ensure that we achieve the transparency, integrity, and the network will be trusted. So please see this. This is my last slide. When you want to first let me go for this, then I will come to this part. You see there are different types of blockchain given: permissionless blockchain, public permissioned blockchain, and private permissioned blockchain. And this one, we assume that we don't want to use this. So what permissionless blockchain means? The public blockchain. Here there is no restriction. Anybody can join and anybody can do mining, and all are having equal privilege in the network. But in case of this permission, these two, the private and public permission, here it is not that all will be allowed to take part. There are some controller. The controller has to allow the people. Yes. Are there any questions, please? Hello?
No, sir, no question.
Okay. So here in permission network, only the restricted users are allowed. That means those who have already registered. Let's say we are having the certificate authority. Those who have got the certificate from the certificate authority can take part in the blockchain. Others cannot take part in the blockchain. That is what the permission. In case of permissionless, anybody can join. Again, what is this public and private permissioned blockchain? In public permissioned blockchain, you can allow any user to verify your, that is, make the transparency of your application to the complete world. But you will not allow any user to write. So let's assume there are two operations, read and write operations. So in case of public permissioned blockchain, you will allow only restricted users to write, but any user to read. In case of private, both read as well as write will be given only to the restricted users. Are you getting the difference between permissionless and public and permissioned blockchain? Again, I repeat, in permissionless, anybody can take part, but in case of permission, only limited users, that means those who are having are allowed to take part in the network can join, others cannot join the network. That's the difference between the permissionless and permission. So in blockchain 1.0 and 2.0, both are permissionless. In blockchain 3.0, they brought this concept as the permissioned blockchain. Even now, Ethereum also, so Bitcoin is permissionless, Ethereum is permissionless, Hyperledger is permissioned. Now Ethereum with proof of authority provides the permissioned blockchain. So where you don't need to solve the huge puzzle. So now, so I hope you understand this. Now let's go. Let's assume that you are having some application, and for that application you want to use blockchain. So first you have to answer the question whether the blockchain is required for your application or not. So that will be based on this. The first question is, do you need to store the state? So you remember, as I said, that state machine, the update of each activity that you want to store or not. If you want to store, then proceed, otherwise don't go for the blockchain. After that, are there multiple writers? If you consider that there is only one person, then there is no need of blockchain. If there are more than one, then you go for the use of blockchain. Again, you see, is there any online trusted third party? You know, there are two third parties, two types of trusted third parties. One is offline and another one is online. In case of offline, they invest or they take part in the beginning. After that, they cannot come. But in case of online TTP, for every transaction, they will take part. So can you use an always online TTP? If it is yes, then no need of blockchain. Otherwise, again proceed. Are all writers known? If you know everyone, then you go here. Otherwise, go to permissionless blockchain. If you don't know anyone, you may know few, but not all of them. So then go for the permissionless blockchain. If you know few, if you know all the users, and are all writers trusted? Again, if you are trusting everybody, then no need of blockchain. Otherwise, you go here and decide whether you want permission or private permission blockchain. If you want public verifiable, then go for public permission. If you don't want any public to perform read as well as write operation, then you go for the private permissioned blockchain. So accordingly, you have to choose whether you need blockchain or not. Okay, so my suggestion is, in most of your application you will be needing needing the permissioned blockchain. So you go for the permissioned, because in permissionless it is very hard to encourage the miners, and since you are not in your application is not having any coin facility. So even then, if you are preferring to go for permissionless blockchain, then please go for IOTA, which takes or which needs less complex puzzle to be solved. So that is the advantage of IOTA compared to all other permissionless blockchain. Otherwise, you can go for Ethereum proof of authority or the Hyperledger. Okay, these are the references. Okay, I am done. So thank you very much for your listening. If you have any questions, then please let me know.
Sir, I have one question.
Little louder, please.
Sir, I have one question regarding the gas limit which you have
So
described.
just 1 second. Do you want to see the slide?
No, I don't want to see the slide.
Okay,
I wanted
okay.
to know, is there a threshold value for the gas limit?
Actually, the gas limits are already defined in the protocol. If you see the Gavin Wood paper, they have mentioned that for every operation, that is when you are making transaction, then 24,000 gas will go. So like that, for every transaction, they have already pre-decided the gas limit.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, one more question. What is the
Yes.
percentage of rewards, sir?
What, madam?
What is the percentage of rewards?
So in Bitcoin, what happens initially, they have given 50 Bitcoin as the reward. After that, I think every 14 years they half it. Then it becomes 25, then 12.5. I think right now they are giving, sorry, it is not 14 years, some other number. Right now, I think they are giving 6.25 as the reward. So like that they reduce. Finally, at one stage there is no reward because they have already fixed the highest value, highest number of bitcoins. I think 24 million BTC they have already fixed. It should not go above that. That's why once they are offering it every 4 years, it will come to zero. After the 4th year, say once it comes to zero, there is no reward. So you can ask the question, if there is no reward, who will go for the transaction or mining the block? So then the transaction fee will take over. So during that time, the transaction fee will increase so that it encourages the miner to mine the blocks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any questions, please?
Sir, would you kindly
Hello,
say
sir.
about some real life examples of blockchain technology where it is being applied?
You want some example?
Yeah.
See, what we have done is we have used for the e-health record management system. So already we have submitted the paper also in a book chapter that is accepted. So and second work what we are doing is we want to do this decentralized authentication in IoT network. So it is that we don't know anybody in the network, and any new user comes, we have to authenticate them, and their information should be stored in the secure manner in the sense where we want to ensure the integrity. For that we use the blockchain.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Hello. Sir, whether this give you some highlights on how decentralized authentication we can implement it using blockchain?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not getting.
Sir, can you give some highlights on how decentralized authentication is implemented using the blockchain? How can we achieve this decentralized authentication?
See, one thing is by default, you know that blockchain is decentralized, right? So everybody is having the information about others. And the second thing, our intention is not that only we use blockchain and bring the decentralization. Our intention is, so let's say you all are there and you all know each other. Okay. And I am coming to join to your network and I am completely new. Okay. And you don't have any information about me with you. Even then you have to authenticate me. Okay, or you have to prove that I am the trusted user or non-trusted user. So for that we use this scoring mechanism and all, that behavior based.
Okay, sir. Sir, whether this paper is accepted, sir? Whether you worked on this decentralized authentication?
No, this we decentralized authentication. No, actually we have submitted to a conference. Mostly by September 10th, we are waiting for the result. In case we get positive response, I will share you the paper with you.
Okay, sir. And sir, can you give me some basic paper for this decentralized authentication?
Paper you want? Okay, I hope you have seen my email ID. You mail me, I will send you the list. The references of my paper I will send you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we will conclude now. For more queries, you can send the mail to sir. I would like to thank Dr. Swangadeshan for his informative lecture. It's a very nice introduction to blockchain, sir. Thank you very much, sir. You cover both Bitcoin and Ethereum. Very nice, sir.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Taken.
Okay, thank you. So if anybody have doubt, please you can write to me through your email. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. We will close the session now. Next session will start at 2:30 p.m. Okay, second session will start at 2:30. Thank you. Thank you all.